Yes, you. Thanks for tuning in to the Healthy, Wild, and Free podcast. My name is David Benjamin. I'm your host and the founder of HealthyWildAndFree.com. If you're like me, you understand that health, the mind, body, spirit, heart connection, and living a green, eco-friendly, sustainable lifestyle are some of the most valuable and life-enhancing lessons that we can learn and pass on to our children to live happy and abundant lives. That's why this podcast was created, to help you grow in these areas. If you aren't already subscribed to the newsletter, go to HealthyWildAndFree.com, click the box at the top right-hand corner to get a free copy of our latest ebook, and you'll be subscribed to be notified about future podcasts. Thanks for subscribing and tuning in. Enjoy. Hello, podcast listeners. This is David Benjamin from HealthyWildAndFree.com. Today we have a very special guest. She is the author of The Plan, which is a book about foods and how your body reacts to them. And basically, the book teaches you how to eliminate the surprising healthy foods that are making you fat and to help you lose weight fast. Her name is Lyn-Genet Recitas. She has been a holistic nutritionist since 1983, studying nutritional therapy, holistic medicine, herbology, homeopathy, and shiatsu. She started working with immune response and hormonal balance 20 years ago on the West Coast and has been running health centers for the past 10 years in New York City and Westchester. LynGenet and her team at the LynGenet Plan have helped thousands of men and women find easy, effective ways to lose weight, improve health, and reverse the aging process. And I'm going to put her through on the call right now.
Good morning.
And LynGenet, are you there?
Yes, good morning. How are you?
I'm doing very well. How are you?
Very good, thank you.
Thank you so much for joining us today. Really appreciate it.
Absolutely, my pleasure.
I wanted to start the interview off actually asking you kind of how you initially got into the health industry. It's something that I think people can kind of relate to, how you had that kind of, I'm interested in health and there's more to this kind of moment. So how did that kind of start for you in your life?
Well, I was a very sickly child, and I had chronic migraines and sort of mild depression and really low energy. And the summer when I was 14, I had a migraine the entire summer.
Wow.
Yeah, and that was it. I had had enough. And I started practicing yoga at the age of 11 and, sort of reading about nutrition and being a vegetarian and some healthy alternative thoughts. And I decided I'm going to become a vegetarian. And I did. And I instantly felt better. My energy improved. And I felt pretty darn amazing. And what I started doing at the age of 15 was actually working in some health food bakeries and restaurants. So I really got exposed to a lot of alternative holistic ideas at an early age, really just being in the forefront of a really nice movement in Southern California. And I kept studying more and more, and by the time I was 18 and I moved back to New York, I started to study herbology. We actually lived down the street from a great herbal school called MetaSuite. I started studying herbology and homeopathy and was really very much into herbs and healings, but on a personal level. And I started seeing the shiatsu therapist also at the age of 18, and I remember being really impressed because she cured or put into remission a mutual friend who had stomach cancer. And I was just amazed and blown away that this could be done just through healing touch and some nutritional advice. So the next thing I started studying was shiatsu, and I started to become immersed a little bit in Chinese thought and Chinese healing. And I kept my studies going, and I kept studying different branches, and it was always part of my life, and I always worked individually with a few clients. I moved to San Francisco, and I became very impressed with the movement that was going on there at that time with people who had AIDS and a lot of the nutritional things that they were doing as far as acupuncture, herbs, and diet. And I started working with a lot of women who weren't happy with practices of general OB, so I started helping them with herbs. And, it just kept building, and I kept doing research and wound up getting my degree from Clayton in holistic nutrition, and everything was going great. But I was a conventional holistic nutritionist. And it wasn't until 2007, I say two important things happened. One, I opened up my health center in Harlem, a holistic health center, and we were a multidisciplinary practice. And the second was I got a BlackBerry. And everybody kind of laughs about getting the BlackBerry. But what wound up happening was going from the you see me once a month or once every couple of weeks, and you pop in and people say, oh, yeah, I'm eating healthy and I lost 3 pounds. I encouraged people to email me daily. And people started emailing me hourly. And what I started to do is I actually started to track their response to so-called healthy foods. Now, I've worked with a food-based vegetarian cleanse since my early 20s. I'm 48. And that really hasn't altered that much. It's pretty much lower inflammatory foods. And we were always taught from the vegetarian standpoint that you would never introduce animal protein after having all these lovely vegetarian meals. You would want to start off with a good, strong vegetarian source of protein like black beans. Well, I started to notice, my God, every time I introduce black beans, somebody's gaining 2 pounds. But not only are they gaining 2 pounds after losing all of this weight, whatever their health issue is flares up as well. So if you had migraines, you'd have a migraine. If you have arthritis, all of a sudden you have an arthritic flare-up. If you're having constipation, all of a sudden you're constipated. And none of this made sense. Black beans are healthy, right?
Yeah.
So I would go on to the next food. This was the whole pericone phase. Oh, salmon. Let's try salmon. Salmon's so healthy. Women over 40 need to eat salmon. Same thing. 85% of my clients were gaining exponential weight with no change in caloric value over the day to a healthy food, and their health issues would crop up. So I started really tracking the effects of healthy foods that actually seemed to instigate weight gain and cause health issues to arise, ones that actually kept the healing process going. And that's how the plan came about.
So it's kind of basically analyzing the approach to people and their diets, and then it kind of became very micromanagement, if you will, and then you kind of stumbled upon it, if you will. It's kind of by accident then, wasn't it?
Totally stumbled upon it. I was blown away by the results that I was seeing. I believed this stuff was healthy all my life. How could walnuts trigger migraines and thyroid dysfunction and acid reflux and depression? I mean, it was amazing what I was seeing, but I was seeing it on such a consistent basis that for the health of my clients, and certainly for the health of my business, I would have to say, you know what, walnuts aren't so good. Let's wait till we test them. If you love them, let's actually test their physiological response on you. So yes, in the beginning it was just tracking data, gathering and analyzing this data, and from that the plan was really born. And we call it almost the Las Vegas School of Nutrition. We have your odds mapped out for you.
Right.
And if you love something, we want you to test it, absolutely. But in the beginning, when we have all that great healing going on from that food-based cleanse, the last thing we want to introduce is something that's potentially going to knock you back to where you were in that pro-inflammatory phase. So if we keep introducing foods and you keep adding in new foods, which you need to do, that have a lower chance of causing this inflammatory process, your body keeps healing. And that's why by day 10 or 14, we can get people off their blood pressure meds, or their cholesterol drops 20 points, or they're talking about cutting their antidepressants. I mean, it's exciting stuff.
Yeah, it's amazing. Starting with the cleanse. So the purpose of the cleanse is really to basically neutralize the body so that it's in a state that you can kind of determine whether there's a reaction or not. Is that the purpose of it?
Absolutely. Now, in the beginning, it just started off, the regular, we just want you to be healthy and you want to lose a few pounds, and that's how it started. But then what we started to do is, taking the information that I gathered and what I found to actually be pretty much universally healthy foods that were low inflammatory, we found a bunch of things happened. One, your response to a food that was inflammatory was greatly amplified. So just aside from the weight gain, if migraines, let's say, are your issue, and you eat the salmon and you have a migraine, it's a very different concept that a nutritionist is saying, don't eat that, it's not healthy for you, and it makes you gain weight. You're like, I never want to see that food again, right? We also find that, and and pretty much anybody involved in alternative and holistic thought will know this, is if you start with a cleansing process, the foods that used to taste great kind of don't taste so great anymore if they're not good for you. We found that sodium was a huge problem. The more sodium that you take in, the more sodium that you crave, so it deadens your palate. But what's really fascinating is a lot of research in the last 15 years has really shown that the more sodium that you take in, the more sugar and carbohydrates that you crave. So just by the simple act of those 3 days of resetting your palate, when you go out to eat that lunch that you would normally have in your favorite takeout place, and you taste it, you're like, I can't believe I used to eat this. This is so salty. And we'll literally see that in just a few days. So once again, that's not me as a nutritionist saying, don't eat that, that's high in sodium. Because look, nobody likes to be told what to do. That's you saying, I don't want to eat this, it doesn't taste good.
Yeah.
So the cleanse has many different facets to it. You know, certainly as a woman, you're consuming over 7,000 calories in those 3 days, and as a man, over 8,500 calories, but you're losing anywhere from 5 to 10 pounds. So another exciting aspect of this is we're kind of really shifting the paradigm away from food as a calorie in, calorie out. Calories mean nothing. All that matters is the way your body metabolizes food. And you can eat a lot and be really full on a cleanse and still heal your body and lose a ton of weight. And that's a nice concept, too.
Yeah. So it sounds more enjoyable. The dreadful cleansing CITD and like, you know, malnutrition, starving looking. You're like, I don't know about that.
I know, exactly. And, you know, my background was in restaurants for a long time. I opened up Balthazar and Pastis, two really famous restaurants here in New York. I really want the food to be delicious. Yeah. So it's taking that I need to suffer aesthetic. That's what a cleanse is, too. Wow, this is really kind of enjoyable. I'm just not eating meat and grains and dairy. And that's kind of fun, too.
Yeah, I think food is meant to be enjoyed, and I think that, you know, when we strip the enjoyment away from food, it's like that's one of the great things of life. You know, different cultures, different food, and you know, getting to experience that. So I think that's valuable. I like the idea too. I mean, it really does make perfect sense. The idea of, you know, quote unquote universally healthy foods. I think we've all had a scenario in our life where we're eating with family or friends, and they say, you know, oh, my stomach hurts, or you know, that food didn't sit good with me, and someone else in the group is completely fine, but that individual is not. So it does make perfect sense. I mean, if you really think about it, what factors really kind of determine how we react to food? Like is blood type, hormones, like genetics? What exactly?
Great question. You know, there are so many factors that go into how we digest food and which foods affect us. And the plan really targets people that are either in an inflammatory state or people as they age, because this is when we really start to get clear markers of whether foods do or don't work for us. What winds up happening is as we age, we lose digestive enzymes and we lose stomach acid, and even saliva decreases. And foods that were easier to digest, let's say in our teens, become slightly problematic in our 20s, and by the time we're in our 30s, they might be a big problem. By the time they're in our 40s and our 50s, they're causing huge GI distress. And remember that 70% of our immune system is in our gut. So whenever we're eating these foods that are not only causing weight gain, but they're affecting our immune system. So we have the components of what's going on digestion-wise. That's part of it. I love that you asked about genetics because, yes, that's huge. I mean, it's well known that African Americans and Asians have a harder time digesting cheese. And if you're Northern European, your body has built enzymes over thousands of years to digest cow's cheese, so it's going to be easier for you. We could just use that as an example. A great example that I had is, and this was in the beginning when I was still in the gathering stage, maybe 5-6 years ago, I wound up getting a bunch of people in Turkey all at once. So I'm like, oh, this is kind of interesting and cool. So it was like maybe 30-40 people, and I'm putting in universally healthy foods according to the plan. And everybody gained weight with broccoli. Now, in most countries I work with, broccoli is really pretty well tolerated. So I was pretty baffled by this. And one woman was smart enough to say, broccoli isn't indigenous to Turkey. We've only had it for 25 years or so because it's the healthy American vegetable to eat. And it just made me think, of course, you don't have the enzymes to break down broccoli. And that's why your body's recognizing it as this foreign invader, and it's causing this huge inflammatory process, right? So what really happens is that our bodies are enzymatically programmed for certain situations and even certain countries. So we'll find that people that are first generation to the States will have a higher incidence of seasonal and environmental allergies, and will have more difficulties digesting the foods here. But by the time you get to third generation, you're not going to have the same problems. So we have ways of getting around that, sort of increasing the strength of your mucosa. We use MSM and probiotics. And that's the same approach that we use for healing leaky gut. But there's 1,000 variables. Will people be more reactive to foods during times of hormonal fluctuation? Absolutely. Do we find what we call inflammatory speed bumps? Usually 25, 35, 42, 50, and 60. You'll digest foods slightly differently. So there's a host of variables that come into play. And the deeper you want to get into the chemistry of it, certainly the more fun it can be. But a lot of people break it down really simply. I ate some pork, I gained a pound, I feel creepy, I'm not eating pork. Mm-hmm. So it depends on how in-depth you want to go with the study.
Right, it can be very simple. With the countries, that's interesting because, obviously there's different foods that different countries will, have part of their staple diet. So is that something that, have you kind of seen a craving link there where, for example, I'm Irish, I have had potato cravings for potato chips, and I don't know if that's an excuse or not, but let's just go with it. Have you seen any kind of craving link between the ancestry and the individual?
These are great questions. Okay, first of all, what you need to know is things like the highest incidence of fish allergies, guess where? Japan. The highest incidence of sesame allergies, the Middle East, and countries with largely Middle Eastern populations like Australia and Canada. So often when a food is eaten too often, it can start to cause food sensitivities or food allergies. When it comes to actual cravings, there's a couple of things that go on. A reactive food can actually be a food, potatoes, let's say you actually crave the potatoes. Okay, we'll just say that you crave the potatoes. But there are other factors in why you crave foods. For some people, it actually causes a mild inflammatory response, which boosts serotonin, because your body's trying to protect you as it's trying to get rid of this bad guy. For other foods, in some people, they can increase leptin levels, which is your hunger and your craving. If you have a problem with yeast overgrowth and you don't know it, you might be craving those potatoes, especially as your yeast population starts to die off, right? So let's say you have some potatoes a couple of days ago and you feed your yeast and they're super happy and the colony's thriving, and then 48 hours later they start to die off. Well, guess who's craving some potatoes? So, and then potatoes might actually work for you because we find potatoes to be lower inflammatory for a lot of people. So, what winds up happening is, we really go through all the research that's out there. Certainly there's so many wonderful things that are being researched right now, and we find that there's so many different schools of thought, and there's